Hi, Kevin. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.
I want to start by asking you about your entrepreneurial career before Eventbrite and actually what triggered you to start the company.
It goes way back into the stone ages of the internet, where I got involved in tech. My first entry into it, I was working in a research lab, and it was a neuro lab, and it was a Unix environment, and it was right at the time of the rise of the internet. And it was such an exciting, the internet was and is such an exciting place that I was immediately kind of in love, and I started my first company in the late 90s. It was one of these kind of dot-com flips. We had an acquisition by a public company, and it wasn't anything to retire off, but it kind of like wet my whistle for really going out there and for the entrepreneurial journey. It also gave me a little bit of a balance sheet. And out of like kind of dumb luck, at the time, Peter Thiel saw the opportunity out in Silicon Valley, and he had been in law, and then he moved into investing in derivatives, and he saw what was happening in the late 90s and came out to Silicon Valley. We were in student politics together. I was an undergrad at Stanford, and he was in law school at the time, and we became friends. So when he came out and started a company, I got involved as an investor and advisor to PayPal. You know, real dumb luck as they were getting started. And so starting out with, my first investment happened to be PayPal as a lead was a great way to see just one of the best teams in all of history execute. When PayPal went public, I remember Mike Moritz had said, when you see a business that's growing to become a market leader, it'll create industries upon industries, and that really got me thinking about it. And I also remember asking Mike about his impression. I actually had met with him to pitch Zoom, which is a money transfer business, the day that PayPal went public, and he said PayPal is just in the first inning, and he was very right about that. And what we were doing in my second business was building payment applications on top of PayPal. So when somebody builds something that's very phenomenal and it's becomes a platform, you want to build on top of it and ride that wave along with them. The modern example today would be OpenAI, and how many great businesses are now being built upon OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI, and so on. So that's how Zoom got started.
And later on, Eventbrite?
Later on, Eventbrite, we actually, when we were starting Zoom, we weren't quite sure what payment service would be the one that really takes off. And so we experimented, my business partner and I, it was just a two-person company, bootstrapped at the time. We're just trying all sorts of different payment applications with the thesis that PayPal at the time was 100% on eBay and needed to diversify, so they had a reason to work with us and help us. And we convinced the head of product at the time, David Sachs, who's now our crypto and AI czar, which I love, and to convince David Sachs to open up an API and develop on that. We built 5 or 6 different payment applications focused on Zoom. But after I stepped out of Zoom a few years later, there were other payment applications, and we built a ticketing application with my wife, Julia, and third co-founder, Renaud Visage, and that's how Eventbrite was born.
Let's talk for a second about scaling. I think we have growth stage companies here. Any thoughts about scaling Eventbrite, do's and don'ts when scaling a company?
We were highly capital efficient, and we had really, just the 3 co-founders, worked on the business for almost 2 years. We started way back when in 2006, and we were highly capital efficient. And I look back and wonder, did we need to do that? And I think the answer was yes. Like, it really trained us to really watch, every kind of penny we spend, and it helped us kind of figure out how to build the business in a way that was hyper efficient. So, we were ramen profitable, kind of before ramen profitability, and those lessons kind of helped us, down the line as we grew the business. Yeah, I mean, I could probably name dozens more do's and don'ts, but I of course have to point out like the lesson of hiring and unfortunately firing as so important. And just really when I see the enduring businesses out there, they all share one consistent factor, and it doesn't matter what their business model is, doesn't matter what kind of application or what segments, it's always team focused. And I was lucky to have been, have a front row seat to see PayPal grow, and that was Peter Thiel, of course, his co-founder Max Levchin. It was Roelof Botha, who now runs Sequoia. It was Reid Hoffman, who created LinkedIn. It was David Sachs, Keith Rabois, all friends, but all phenomenally talented people, and just that lesson to always keep the talent density as tight as can be.
Yeah, super interesting. So Eventbrite goes public successfully. Everything is going great, and then out of nowhere, COVID hits, and there are no more events. The business basically dries out. And Eventbrite faces the ultimate crisis. What was the first thing you and Julia did when COVID hits?
Well, when I was when we were talking and planning this, I was kind of going back to those that kind of dark time for us. But then, of course, this vintage audience, a lot of you live in Israel, so you've been through some way harder times than Eventbrite and COVID, I should, of course, point out. So the resilience is important. And, I think that's, first of all, is one has to remember, this is the fog of war, and you're making decisions under duress and very difficult situation. And I certainly don't wish it upon other entrepreneurs by any means, but certainly this is a time where one is really forged in the fire. I remember standing at our kitchen counter, just watching all the numbers, trend to zero in that kind of March, April of 2020 timeframe, and watching the revenue not just go to zero. So we're a public company. And seeing, I think the year before we had done something like $5 billion in gross ticket volume, and seeing that gross ticket volume and net revenue go to zero, but then go to negative because people were processing refunds as well. And to see, your whole OpEx, it's almost like the sea drew back and your boat is just washed up on the shore, was pretty stark. And so we really broke it down into three areas. Like, one, we wanted to raise extra funding and raise funding in the public markets, through a vehicle there. Two was to take out a lot of the OpEx. And when I say take out OpEx, that's like a euphemism for heavy layoffs. We let go of a very high percentage, almost 45% of the workforce, and we were 1,400 people at the time, and also really help our customers. Those were the three things. Of course, order of operation is really important, and we had to work on the OpEx side first. And I'm very proud of Julia, how she kind of really did kind of all these three, was able to execute through all these three.
Eventbrite was public during this entire time. How did you manage investors' relation and expectation around this crisis?
You know, the public markets, and maybe to tie it in with the NASDAQ presentation is, you know, we're a public company, but in many regards we're no different than a private company, just in you have greater visibility by the world and shareholders in the world. And you know, in the case of COVID, we had raised what's called a PIPE, an investment into a public entity. And by the way, that's, I think, you know, there's a lot of glorification or vilification of IPOs, but they are just a fundraising round. And you know, the only thing that really matters at the end of the day are the results of the business, and you know, and that's indistinct whether private or public. And certainly going through this episode was, you know, a reminder of that.
Yeah. And in retrospect, if you had to do it all over again, would you do anything differently? Or what did you learn? What did you take from it for the longer term?
To be honest, like, it's nice in the private markets. I remember an exec at Meta told me once, it's cold outside the castle. It's tough to be, you know, a kind of public company out there. We have these 7 monopolists out there that kind of suck all the oxygen out of the room. And so there are so many attributes to being private. Unfortunately, you know, there's also, I think, a lot of founders kind of hide in the private markets and don't have the same accountability. So I've always loved the accountability that a public market brings, and I think it drives results. It can drive results to perform in the public. It's kind of like if a baseball team was playing a game and there was no one in the stands, would they really play their best? Maybe, maybe not. But you know, I think more founders should go public. And in fact, back in the olden days, you know, or back in the 90s and before, I remember John Doerr used to say, you have 6 quarters, if you can show 6 quarters of increasing revenue, go public. And so it used to be you just get pushed out of the nest and it was sink or swim. And there's a lot of viability to that. And you know, as we've now kind of sealed up and have this great big rash of companies, now, you know, once you get out, you have to show that you can succeed and grow, but it can be a great experience.
What do you think is the right timing to go public? What a company needs, you have the perspective.
6 quarters of increasing revenues. You know, I've got a fund in San Francisco, A-Star, and we're a seed fund. Bennett's, my colleague Bennett's in the audience here, but you know, I'm a big fan of that. I know the chairman of the NASDAQ would also feel the same way about 6 quarters of increasing profitability, but I do think more companies should be getting out to the public markets, and you know, with Sarbanes-Oxley, with all these different changes, we're all just kind of gummed up in this no man's land of private businesses.
Would you recommend your companies as an investor to go public sooner or later?
Well, it's been challenging for Eventbrite. Eventbrite's kind of bouncing around in the single-digit stock numbers, and that has been very difficult for me mentally and emotionally, to be honest. So I'm mixed. I'm certainly mixed on that. We had a great experience with Zoom and seeing it. We went public in 2013 on the NASDAQ, and the business was acquired for just over $1 billion in 2015. And maybe I also have some angst about that, because I look at some of the later competitors that came out, Remitly, TransferWise, and so on, which were very small at our time. And you know, they've grown to be multi-billion-dollar public companies. And you know, in that case, we maybe should have stayed independent as a public company. So in any regards, I think that keeps driving me forward to try to get it right the next time.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one, and then maybe a good segue. I think but you have done both, basically, both investing and operating. And I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective on how is it like to be a CEO of of a company versus an investors, and how do you find a way to combine both of them in your day-to-day?
Well, A-Star is we're in our second fund, a $300 million fund. Very excited to have you as LPs, and you've been very helpful proactively with our portfolio companies. So thank you for that as well. And at the same time, we've done 3 incubations over almost 4 years. And the one I'm working on most recently is a home security startup. We're kind of refer to it as military-grade home security. Our thesis on that is that there's been a lot of innovation in the self-driving space, autonomy, robotics, and so we're kind of taking this and using it to kind of finally get a great home security solution. That in a world now where if any of you have home security systems, they're terrible. So it's fun to get to practice again the operating side. We just unveiled the company on Thursday of last week. And at the same time, focus on continuing investing in great companies on the seed side. So I get to get my cake and get to eat it too.
Yeah, you managed to do it all, basically. Yeah. I think we have a few more minutes, so maybe one last question. You started Eventbrite with your wife, Julia. How has it been to found a company with your spouse?
It's one of the greatest moments was that experience of working. Working together, people thought we were insane. We started out in a kind of windowless telco closet. We were given free office space with sawhorse desks. And Renault worked mostly remotely. We were kind of OG remote office people, but the two of us worked together in this for years. I ran Eventbrite for almost 10 years, and she was my counterweight. She is the greatest co-founder and greatest experience. And one of the hardest things of COVID was it was kind of time for me to transition out of Eventbrite entirely. At the time, I was on the board and chairman, and now I'm completely out of the business. And it's kind of a sad breakup, although we're still, of course, married. But yeah, it's
better than the other way around.
Yes, way better than the other way around.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for being here today and for sharing this with us.
Thank you.